I was 39 years old when the quiet unraveling of my marriage became undeniable. For almost 2 decades, I had built my life around Daniel, my husband, my supposed partner, the man I once believed to be my anchor in a chaotic world. We had met when I was 21, a wide-eyed university student full of fire and dreams, while he was already established in finance, calm and self-assured. He was older, steadier, and I mistook that steadiness for loyalty. By the time I turned 30, I was running my own company. I had poured my youth into building it from the ground up, working nights, sacrificing weekends, fighting to prove myself in a world that doubted a young woman's authority. Daniel liked to brag about me at parties, liked the shine of my success, but at home he withdrew. Somewhere along the way, the intimacy of our marriage dissolved into polite conversations, obligatory dinners, and long stretches of absence. I told myself it was the cost of ambition that two people working hard might drift, but would always come back to each other. Until I discovered the truth. It wasn't a dramatic confession or a lipstick stain on a collar, it was numbers. I had always been meticulous about our accounts, so when a line item caught my eye, hotel charges, dinners at places we never went, Uber rides in neighborhoods we never visited, I started digging. What I found made my blood run cold. And then there were the messages. Careless, foolish, but undeniable. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Paris next month. Our secret escape. My chest constricted so tightly I thought I might pass out. My husband wasn't just distracted, he was unfaithful. And the woman he betrayed me with wasn't a stranger. She was a younger woman I vaguely remembered from one of his office parties. Bright, ambitious, maybe 10 years younger than me. Her name was Claire. I sat at my desk that night staring at the glow of my computer screen, shaking with rage. Rage not only at him, but at myself. For ignoring the signs. For dismissing my instincts when his late nights became too frequent, when his touch grew too mechanical, when his smile no longer reached his eyes. I had given him my loyalty, my best years, my unwavering trust, and he had traded them for someone new, someone exciting, someone he thought was easier. But beneath the rage, a strange calm began to take shape. Because unlike the naive girl who once clung to him, I was no longer powerless. I had built something of my own, something strong, something untouchable. And for the first time, I realized I could use that power not to beg for his love, but to take back my dignity. That's when the idea took root. Revenge. Not the messy, impulsive kind that leaves you emptier than before. No, I wanted something precise, calculated, poetic. Something that would make them both feel the sting of betrayal in the way I had felt it. Weeks passed. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry or scream. I simply watched, gathered information, and waited. And then one day, my HR director brought me a resume for a promising candidate applying for a junior executive position in our firm. When I saw the name, my lips curved into the faintest smile. Claire. She had no idea my company was mine. No idea that the woman she had been sleeping her way into my husband's life belonged to the same empire I controlled. The interview was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. I remember walking into the boardroom, my heels echoing on the polished floor, my heart thrumming with anticipation. She looked up from her folder, expecting just another panel of managers. And then her face froze. She tried to hide it quickly, but I saw the flicker of recognition the way her breath caught when she realized who I was. I didn't let her off the hook. "Claire, is it?" I said smoothly, extending my hand as though she were any other candidate. Her fingers trembled when they met mine. It was a performance from both of us. She pretended not to know, and I pretended not to care. But beneath the surface, a storm churned. She had stolen my husband, invaded my home, laughed in the privacy of her pillow while I slept alone. And now she was sitting across from me, vulnerable, unaware of just how deep my plan would cut. I hired her. Of course I did. She was competent enough on paper, ambitious enough to thrive in the role, but that wasn't why I gave her the job. I hired her because revenge, when done right, requires proximity. And I wanted her close. Close enough to see me every day, to feel the weight of my gaze, to wonder what I knew, to squirm beneath the mask of professionalism. As she signed her contract, her eyes flickered with unease, and I smiled because the game had just begun. The first few weeks were almost delicious in their irony. Claire walked into the office every morning in her perfectly pressed blouses and tailored skirts, her hair sleek, her smile polished. To anyone else, she looked like the picture of confidence, but I noticed the small cracks. The way her eyes darted toward me during meetings, the stiffness in her laugh, the way her hands fidgeted with her pen when I addressed her directly. She was trying so hard to appear composed, but I could feel the undercurrent of fear running beneath her every move. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I played the role of mentor. I praised her ideas in front of colleagues, gave her projects that put her in the spotlight, and occasionally invited her into my office for one-on-one feedback. Every time she seemed startled that I was being kind. She would sit across from me, her eyes flickering with confusion, her lips forming polite thanks, but her posture tense like she was waiting for the blow to fall. It wasn't kindness, it was strategy. I wanted her to trust me, or at least to rely on me. I wanted her to lean into the hand she had once bitten, to wonder why I wasn't retaliating, to doubt her own security. Because doubt is more corrosive than anger. It eats at you slowly, day by day, until you begin to collapse under your own fear. At home, Daniel remained oblivious. He still left early, came home late, whispered texts into his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. Sometimes, when he climbed into bed beside me, smelling faintly of cologne and wine, I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. If only he knew. If only he realized that his precious mistress was reporting to me every single day, hanging on my approval, bound by the salary I signed. And Claire, she began to unravel. I saw it in the way her cheeks paled when Daniel's name came up casually at a staff dinner, in the way her laugh faltered when I asked her about her personal goals. She was waiting for me to snap, to expose her, to ruin her. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I gave her rope. I encouraged her to take on more responsibility, to attend client meetings, to deliver presentations. I introduced her to senior partners, praising her initiative. To everyone else, it looked like I was grooming her for leadership. But in reality, I was building her pedestal, so when it toppled, the fall would be spectacular. One afternoon, as we wrapped up a quarterly review, she lingered in my office. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice edged with something I couldn't quite read. "Gratitude, guilt, fear. You've given me opportunities I never imagined I'd have." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "Talent deserves recognition," I said evenly. And then, after a pause, I added, "But talent also requires integrity. Without that, everything else crumbles eventually." Her face blanched. She muttered a quick goodnight and fled the room, her heels clicking frantically against the marble floor. I watched her go, satisfaction curling in my chest. She knew. She knew I knew. And that knowledge was far more powerful than any direct accusation. Meanwhile, whispers began to circulate. Office gossip is inevitable, and it didn't take long for some employees to notice the unusual closeness between Claire and me. Some thought she was my protégée. Others speculated something darker. I let the rumors simmer, feeding the atmosphere of tension without ever clarifying. Because the truth was, I wasn't after simple humiliation. I wanted her to crumble under the weight of her own choices. I wanted Daniel to see the perfect image he had built of her collapse in real time. And I wanted everyone who had pitied me to understand that I wasn't a victim, I was the architect of my own justice. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Our annual gala was approaching, a lavish event attended by partners, clients, and the press. Claire had been put in charge of a major portion of the program, a chance to prove herself in front of the entire company. She was nervous, but determined, and I encouraged her every step of the way. I told her she would shine, that this was her moment. And it would be, but not in the way she imagined. The night of the gala shimmered with elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the ballroom, glasses clinked, and laughter mingled with the soft strains of a string quartet. It was the kind of night designed for perfection, for power to be displayed in silk gowns and tailored suits. I arrived in a dress the color of midnight, my hair swept into a sleek chignon, every detail calculated to command attention without a word. Daniel walked in later, arms slung casually around Claire's waist. My pulse quickened, though not from pain anymore. Watching them together no longer cut me open. It fueled me. He looked smug, self-satisfied, while she looked radiant on his arm, her confidence bolstered by the illusion that she was untouchable. I smiled from across the room, a smile she returned hesitantly, unsure of what it meant. The program began smoothly. Claire took the stage halfway through, standing at the podium with practiced poise, her voice ringing out clear and confident. She spoke about growth, innovation, and vision. The crowd applauded, charmed by her youthful energy. To them, she was a rising star. To me, she was a shadow cast by betrayal, standing in a spotlight I had given her. When she finished, I approached the stage. The applause was still echoing as I took the microphone, thanking her graciously, complimenting her contributions. She relaxed, a flash of relief crossing her face. She thought the moment had passed without incident. But then my tone shifted. "There's something extraordinary about integrity," I said, my gaze sweeping across the crowd. "It's invisible, yet it defines us. Without it, all the talent and ambition in the world cannot sustain success." I let the words hang, the silence heavy, and then I turned toward Claire. "Integrity," I continued softly, as knowing the difference between earning your place and stealing it. A ripple passed through the audience. Claire's face paled. Daniel stiffened in his chair, his jaw tightening. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her by name. I simply laid the truth bare in the subtlest of ways, with enough precision that everyone in the room could feel the weight of what I wasn't saying. I saw her tremble. She tried to smile to keep her composure, but her mask cracked. The whispers began immediately, people leaning toward one another, piecing together the puzzle. Some already knew, some suspected. Tonight, suspicion turned to certainty. I ended my speech gracefully, thanking the guests, raising a glass to resilience and truth. The applause was polite but strained, fractured by the undercurrent of scandal. When I stepped down, I felt their eyes follow me, not with pity, but with awe. Daniel caught up with me near the edge of the ballroom, his face dark with anger. "What the hell was that?" he hissed. I met his glare with calm indifference. "A lesson," I replied. "One you should have learned long ago." Claire hovered behind him, her hands shaking, her eyes wide with humiliation. The golden girl he had chosen over me was unraveling, not in the privacy of stolen hotel rooms, but in front of the very world she had hoped to impress. I didn't need to say more. My silence spoke louder than any outburst could, and as I walked away, the crowd parted for me, their murmurs swelling like the tide. Claire's downfall had begun not by my hand alone, but by the truth she carried and the shame she could no longer escape. That night, when I returned home, I poured myself a glass of champagne and stood at the window looking out at the city lights. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing down on me. No chains, no humiliation, no endless questions of why. I had reclaimed my story. And yet I knew the game wasn't finished. Revenge had been set in motion, but the true reckoning between me, Daniel, and Claire was still ahead. The weeks after the gala unfolded like a slow-motion implosion. The whispers that had begun that night spread like wildfire through the company and beyond. Clients called me discreetly, asking if the rumors were true. Partners looked at Daniel with suspicion when he attended functions. And Claire, once the bright, ambitious newcomer, was now greeted with cool smiles and sidelong glances that sliced deeper than words. I watched it all quietly. I didn't need to say a thing. The seed had been planted, and the truth had taken root in fertile soil. Her confidence cracked, her work suffered, and the polished veneer she once wore like armor began to crumble. She still came into the office each morning, head held high, but I could see the tremor in her hands when she held her coffee, the forced brightness in her voice when she greeted her colleagues. It was only a matter of time. At home, Daniel became restless. His late nights grew later, his excuses thinner, his temper shorter. He snapped at me over trivial things, as if his frustration with himself could somehow be redirected toward me. But I didn't engage. I answered him with calm detachment, a silence that unnerved him more than any shouting match ever could. One evening, he confronted me in the kitchen, his face red with anger. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he demanded, watching everything fall apart. "You think you've won." I looked at him evenly, my voice steady. "This isn't about winning, Daniel. This is about truth. And you don't get to rewrite it anymore." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him, and for the first time I felt nothing but relief. His rage no longer pierced me, it rolled off me like water. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. Claire had been assigned to present at a high-profile client meeting, a chance to salvage her reputation. But halfway through her pitch, she faltered. Her slides wouldn't load, her voice shook, and when a client asked a pointed question, she froze completely. The silence stretched unbearably until I stepped in, smoothing over the chaos with practiced ease. The meeting was saved, but Claire's career was not. Later that day, she came into my office, her face pale, her eyes brimming with tears. "Why are you doing this to me?" she whispered, her voice cracking. I leaned forward, folding my hands on the desk. "Doing what, Claire? Giving you the job you asked for, letting you prove yourself." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "The only thing destroying you is your own choices." She broke, then her composure shattering. "I never meant for it to go this far," she choked out. "I thought he loved me. I thought—" Her words collapsed into sobs. I watched her, my heart a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. She had stolen my husband, yes. She had flaunted her victory. But in the end, she was just another woman deceived by Daniel's charm, another pawn in his selfish game. That night I made my decision. It wasn't enough to watch her crumble quietly. It wasn't enough to let Daniel squirm under the weight of gossip. I wanted closure, not just for me, but for the years of my life wasted on his lies. So I filed for divorce, not with anger, not with theatrics, but with a clarity that stunned even me. When I handed Daniel the papers, his face went slack, his eyes darting between me and the documents, as though he couldn't quite believe I had taken the final step. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice low, trembling with a mix of rage and fear. But it was. For me, it was over. For him, it was just beginning. Because revenge hadn't been about screaming matches or throwing plates. It had been about precision, patience, and truth. And the final act of my revenge would be leaving him behind, stripped of his mistress, his reputation, and the illusion that he held any power over me. The divorce proceedings were swift, almost anticlimactic. Daniel tried to fight, of course, tried to paint me as cold, unfeeling, tried to clutch at whatever scraps of dignity he thought he had left. But the evidence was stacked too high against him. The financial records, the messages, the witnesses who had seen too much at company parties. His attorney argued, but even in the courtroom I could sense the tide turning against him. Claire wasn't by his side. By then she had all but disappeared from the company, resigning quietly, under the weight of whispers and shame. The bright, ambitious woman who once walked with her chin high now avoided the very streets where people might recognize her. I didn't need to lift a finger, her downfall had unfolded exactly as I knew it would. When the judge declared the marriage dissolved, I felt no tears, no grief. Just a clean emptiness like the air after a storm. I walked out of that courthouse lighter than I had in years. For so long I had been carrying the weight of betrayal, humiliation, and rage. Now I carried nothing but my own freedom. Friends called me brave. Some whispered that I was ruthless. But none of them truly understood the depth of what I had endured, the nights I lay awake, wondering what I had done wrong, the mornings I forced myself to smile, while the man beside me texted another woman under the sheets. Revenge hadn't healed me, it never could. But it had given me clarity. It had reminded me that I was not powerless, that I had always been stronger than both of them. Months later, I stood in the departure lounge of an airport, a one-way ticket in my hand. Paris, Rome, Tokyo. The world stretched before me, waiting to be claimed. I had sold my share of the company, packed up the house, and shed the remnants of a life that no longer belonged to me. For the first time since I was 21, I was free to choose without compromise, without asking anyone's permission. As the boarding call echoed, I thought about Daniel, about Claire, about the wreckage they had made of their lives and the illusion they had once built together. I wondered if they still thought about me, if they still feared the shadow of the truth I had revealed. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. Either way, it no longer mattered. What mattered was this: I had survived. I had rebuilt. I had risen from the ashes of betrayal, not as a victim, but as a woman who finally knew her own worth. And that's what I want you to hear if you've walked through betrayal yourself. Revenge might tempt you, and yes, it can give you a moment of satisfaction. But the real victory is in choosing yourself, in walking away with your head held high, in reclaiming the pieces of your soul that no one can take from you. So if my story touched you, if you've ever been betrayed but found the strength to stand again, I invite you to join me here. Like this video, share it with someone who needs courage, subscribe for more stories of resilience and truth. And most of all, leave a comment. Tell me your story, because every scar has a voice, and sometimes sharing it is the first step to healing.